4 people went into a hole in the ground in Australia. None of them came back. And to this day, nobody knows exactly what happened to them. Not a theory, not a likely explanation, not a working hypothesis. Nobody knows. The equipment was functional. The cave was known. The divers were experienced. The conditions were normal. And 4 people vanished into water so dark that the rescue teams who went in after them could not see their own hands. This is the Mount Gambier cave diving disaster. And it is the only major cave diving incident in history where the cause of death remains genuinely, completely, officially unknown. Mount Gambier sits in South Australia. From the road, it looks like farmland. Flat. Unremarkable. The kind of landscape you drive through without looking twice. But underneath that farmland, underneath the fields and the fences and the completely normal Tuesday afternoon surface of things, is one of the most extensive underwater cave systems on Earth. Hundreds of kilometers of flooded passages, crystal clear water fed by underground aquifers, visibility so perfect in some sections that divers describe it as flying through air rather than swimming through water. It is genuinely beautiful. It is also genuinely deadly. The site known as the shaft sits inside that farmland. A 400-foot deep sinkhole, open at the top, sunlit in the upper chamber, explored dozens of times before May 1973. 8 divers arrived there on a day that began completely normally. By the end of it, 4 of them were dead. Here is what is known. All 8 divers entered the shaft together. The upper chamber was familiar, sunlit, safe, everything they expected. Then, some members of the group descended deeper, into a section called the lower chamber, a section that sits beyond the reach of natural light, where the water temperature drops, where the visibility, despite being technically clear, becomes disorienting because there is nothing to orient to. Just dark water in every direction. 4 divers went into that lower section. 4 divers did not come back out. Here is what is not known. Everything else. The exact sequence of events inside that lower chamber has never been established. The precise cause of death has never been confirmed. The official investigation was unable to determine what specifically went wrong, which means somewhere in the flooded darkness of the shaft's lower chamber, something happened. Something that killed 4 experienced divers, and left no explanation that anyone has been able to confirm in the 50 years since. The leading theory involves nitrogen narcosis, which sounds like a band name but is considerably less enjoyable than one. Nitrogen narcosis occurs when a diver descends below approximately 100 feet breathing standard compressed air. At that depth, nitrogen begins entering the bloodstream in concentrations that affect the brain. The symptoms range from mild euphoria to complete disorientation to total loss of judgment. Divers describe it as being drunk. Except you are drunk at the bottom of a flooded cave with limited air and no natural light, which is considerably worse than being drunk at a party. The lower chamber of the shaft sits at depths where nitrogen narcosis becomes a serious factor. The theory is that 1 or more of the 4 divers became disoriented, confused, unable to make rational decisions, and the situation escalated in ways that killed all 4 before anyone could intervene. It is a reasonable theory. It fits the available evidence, and it explains nothing specific about what actually happened in that water, because nobody survived to say. Now here is the detail that makes this story different from every other cave diving disaster. The shaft is not a remote location. It is not a cave accessible only to elite technical divers with specialized equipment and years of training. In 1973, it was a relatively accessible recreational dive site. People dove it regularly. It had been done dozens of times without serious incident. The 4 divers who died were not making an unprecedented exploratory push into unknown territory. They were doing something that had been done before, by people who came back, which means the difference between the dives that ended safely and the dive that killed 4 people is unknown. There is no identified equipment failure, no confirmed navigation error, just 8 people who went in and 4 who came out, and 50 years of nobody being able to explain why those 4 and not the others. The recovery operation was as difficult as everything else about this story. The lower chamber is not easily accessible. The depths involved require significant decompression stops on the way back up. The darkness makes navigation genuinely dangerous, even for experienced divers. Recovery teams went in. They found the bodies. They were unable to establish cause of death beyond general drowning, consistent with multiple possible scenarios. The cave was not closed. And this is the part of the story that stops people. The shaft is still a dive site. People still go in. Experienced cave divers still descend into the same lower chamber where 4 people died and nobody could explain why. They go anyway. Because cave divers are a specific type of person. The type who reads about 4 unexplained deaths in a flooded cave and thinks, I wonder what's down there. There is a reason unsolved disasters are harder to process than explained ones. When something goes wrong and we know why, we can categorize it, learn from it, tell ourselves we would do differently. When something goes wrong and nobody knows why, the brain cannot close the file. It keeps returning to it, keeps running scenarios, keeps asking the question that has no answer. What happened down there? 4 people went into dark water. Their experience was real. The cave was known, and something happened. Something specific. Something that unfolded in a sequence. Something that had a beginning and a middle and an end. And the end was 4 people dead in a flooded chamber in South Australia. And nobody, not the investigators, not the surviving divers, not the researchers who have studied this case for 50 years. Nobody can tell you what the middle was. The shaft sits in that farmland right now. The water is still crystal clear in the upper chamber. The lower chamber is still dark, still cold. The 4 divers who died in May 1973 have names. They had families. They drove to a field in South Australia on a completely normal morning expecting to have a dive and go home. They did not go home. And the most disturbing thing about their story is that nobody can tell you why. Some questions get answered eventually. Investigations conclude. Evidence surfaces. Survivors speak. Technology improves and cold cases crack open. This one has not cracked in 50 years. 4 people, 1 cave, 0 explanation. That file is still open. This is Vorin. Every story on this channel is real. Subscribe. Next video, the man who survived alone on an underground island for 6 weeks, and what he wrote in the sand before rescue came. That story is already waiting.